Hello, hello, Dr. Maxey. How are you?
I'm great.
Good, good, good.
We're having a brief technical problem. Give us a few seconds, I'm told. Hmm. Today is pretty obvious what we're going to talk about, but we're going to give a few more seconds to Simon. He's in the land of hurricanes, even though I don't think it's going on down there. Hello? Okay. He experienced a crash, so he said we should go ahead and get started. That's neighbor Steven.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Elk Trust. We are going to have a very timely discussion today regarding natural disasters. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neighbor Stevens. Uh, I've had so many calls over the past few days wondering if I was safe, my family was safe. I live in Southern California, but I think I'm about 40 or 50 miles from where the current fires are raging. And I feel so much empathy and sadness for the people who are affected. I've been to some of those neighborhoods and homes, and they're fabulous. But it's not just rich people, it's all types of people and all sorts of levels. And many of them will have a difficult time being rehoused. And several of our Black Health Trust board members and presenters have been severely affected by having to evacuate their homes. So it occurred to me as I got the calls uh, what I would do. Should I really have to leave my home? And I put together a list with the help of AI, of course, And we know that to prepare for emergency evacuation, you got to take more than your keys in your wallet. You have to be prepared. So everybody has a set of prompting slides. Dr. Walsh, Dr. Neighbor Stevens, Dr. Hines. So I want to go in order. Just we know that preparing for evacuation, we put together this guide. In the event of a national natural disaster, it can make a significant difference that can ensure the safety of your family, including small children, elderly adults, and pets. So Black Health Trust has put together a guide. Now, this is simply a guide. It can be expanded, but it'll give us the points we want to discuss. So one of the first things you want to do is develop a family emergency plan, a communication plan. Ensure that everyone knows how to control each other and where to meet if you get separated, and share your phone numbers and designate an out-of-town emergency uh, contact. Some places not going to be affected uh, where you are. The other thing is that you want to know how to evacuate, like which way to turn. Do you got to have your driveway and turn right or left? And what are the best routes for you to take? And you can only do that by practice, and you need to know where local shelters are. And you actually need to have drills and practice evacuation with your family to familiarize everyone with the process. So, uh, Dr. Neighbor Stephen, maybe you take the next one if you don't mind.
You want to have an emergency kit, and the emergency kit needs to be tailored to your household's needs. And let me say that the context of today's conversation is around the fires in California. But here in Nashville and in Tennessee, Kentucky, in points north and east, this whole week we've been told on the news about assembling our emergency kits, which needed to have items to protect us from the cold. So your emergency kit, you have standard things, but you also have to be aware of what the nature of the emergency is to make sure that your needs are met. So on our slide, we're talking about food and water supplies, uh, comfortable weather appropriate clothing, and sturdy shoes. We were getting the information along with the food with batteries, flashlights, and heavy blankets in order to protect us from the cold.
Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Uh, you want to go with this, Ms. Romero?
You should have a first aid kit that includes bandages, antiseptics, prescription medications, and special medical equipment, and supplies for hygiene, including toiletries such as toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, hand sanitizer, tissues, feminine hygiene products, and diapers for infants.
Dr. Walks. Is Dr. Walks unmuted?
The next slide is important documents. Copies of IDs, insurance policies, medical records, and birth certificates. Place documents in waterproof and fireproof containers. And then electronics, portable phone chargers and backup batteries and flashlights with extra batteries.
Dr. Walks, that reminds me that I heard in some of the areas where, at least out here where the fires were, but due to the disaster, the cell phone networks are down. So that's something we need to plan on. In fact, I've often had an emergency. I have satellite phones. Does that work?
Uh, Satellite phones should work, Dr. Maxey. Certainly when I worked in the government, we were issued satellite phones. I don't have one now, but I think it is a good idea. I remember watching the news, and they were talking about the fires coming very close to all the cell and transmission equipment in Mount Wilson in Southern California. Um, and to Dr. Neighbor Stevens' point, last weekend I was in California, worried about getting away from the fires, and I came back to um, Maryland and stepped right into the cold. So can be it can be unexpected the extent of challenges we have. So this is very timely, as Dr. Neighbor Stevens said, for folks all over the country in different parts of the country.
Thank you.
I don't know if we mentioned it yet, but we should mention and continue to mention the challenges of the air quality in Southern California. It's been really significant. So
Yeah, they're actually recommending that you have N95 masks. We remember those because the air quality, and even if you can smell the smoke and particles, that's good. But even if you can't smell it, the air quality will be affected. And those things can get in your lungs and cause a major problem. Dr. Hines, next slide, if you would.
Before you switch to this one, I was just going to say on your about communication. While I don't have any experience with satellite phones, remember radio still does exist, and you can get there are radios like emergency radios that you can have that can be solar powered. Mine is solar powered, and it has a little crank, and it has the frequencies for emergencies. So whether weather emergencies, emergency evacuation information, so those things. I think a lot of us are used to doing everything digitally, but that the radio still is a method of at least finding out information. It won't necessarily allow you to talk to your loved ones, but it can tell you where you need to go, what direction you need to be heading in, where shelters are, those types of things.
Now it occurs to me, Dr. Hines, I don't even have a radio in my house, so we need to get a radio, right?
Yeah.
Now, are you talking about a commercial radio or a two-way radio?
So I have both, right? So I have a two-way radio, and I have it's like I said, it's just an old school. It's not the commercial radio. It is specifically for this purpose, right? And it has, like I said, it's solar. It has a crank because batteries get to be an issue, and it automatically can go to the frequencies of those emergency stations. And got it on Amazon. Not that I'm hyping Amazon, but my point is readily available.
Okay.
And let me add to what Dr. Hines just said, because we were talking about having an evacuation plan. Depending on the nature of the emergency, your evacuation plan may need to change. So being able to have that immediate access through the type of radio Dr. Hines is talking about, maybe your typical evacuation shelter is unavailable because of the nature of the emergency or the location of the emergency.
Okay, thank
I would
you.
like to add, sorry, Dr. Maxey. I would just like to add that hopefully our evacuation kits are sitting somewhere unused and we don't have to use them, but it's important to keep them updated, making sure the food items that you have are not expired and that your batteries are still usable. So you probably have to change them out if you're not using that. And hopefully you never have to use your emergency kit.
We handle the next one, Romero?
And then in addition to, so small children, right? So things to take. And I had a house fire, right? So learn this lesson. Taking the comfort items, the stuffies, the blankets, the favorite toys. If you have babies, the formula bottles, baby food. We talked about diapers, wipes, portable changing bags, all those things, especially for infants, are oftentimes in your diaper bag. Any medications that kids need. And the reality is you have to really think through some of these things because one, with kids, you need to make sure that they're growing, right? So if you packed your bag last year and it's got clothes in it from last year, if you needed to use it, the kids can't wear those clothes anymore. Or as Dr. Nabert Stevens was saying, maybe they're for the wrong season. Medications is tricky because sometimes, because if I pull the medications out and I'm leaving them somewhere, how am I using them also, especially if it's something that my kid takes, and this is for adults too, right? That you take on a regular basis, because it's also hard to get an extra supply, an extra 30-day supply of your medicines from your pharmacy or whatever. So you really have to think through some of these things. I will also say www.ready.gov is a government-sponsored website that has a lot of this information available to you, checklists and those types of things. And to Ms. Romero's point, I have a whole bunch of stuff, but I haven't packed it in any reasonable fashion, right? So going all the way through with whatever process you come up with is important.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Ms. Romero, you want to handle this one?
For pets, we should make sure that we have plenty of pet food and water for at least 3 days. You want to be able to control your pet with a leash and a collar. ID tags are important in case you get separated. I actually have an air tag on my pet. You're going to have a crate or a carrier. Copies of vaccination records and any prescribed medications, comfort items such as blankets or toys, and importantly, waste disposal supplies such as a litter box or plastic bags.
Let me ask you a question, Ms. Monroe.
Yes.
As a nurse, you took care of a friend yesterday, and I'm thinking that an animal bite can sometimes, in an emergency, these animals can have psychiatric problems as well as humans can. Not that this animal did, but is that a concern you wanted to speak a moment about? What did you have to treat?
I had to treat a bite to a hand by a dog that was having some behavioral problems, displaced from his home. The pet had lost its home as well. He was in a strange environment. I'm not sure if a comfort toy would have helped the dog at the time, but yeah, our pets are definitely, struggle with displacement in emergencies as well.
Well, thank you so much. Dr. Neighbor Stevens?
Well, you want to prepare your vehicle. When I'm in Florida, part of the emergency instructions that we are given routinely, and really it applies to wherever you are. If there's an emergency, try to get a full tank of gas, because you never know if gas is always going to be available. So you want to fill up and not run it all the way down to E before you get any more gas. You want to have emergency kits for your car. You want to have those battery cables and the things that you need in case the car stops working, spare tire, jack, all that good stuff. And, old school maps. You might not have internet. Hopefully, you can still read a map, so you can find out where you're going.
That's very important. And just while we're on this, now I don't drive. I haven't driven for a few years. What might be a plan, somebody living alone or that doesn't own a car? How would you suggest they apply?
Again, I can speak to what is done, what I have observed being done in hurricane and flood potential emergencies, where there are numbers available to the for shelter and emergency transportation. If we're talking about a cold emergency, if you lose your power, you can reach out to the utilities, and you can to let them know that you've lost your utility, and again find out where there are emergency centers for emergency housing. Same thing, we're talking about cold and fire and flooding. Let me also not leave out heat. You all may recall we had a whole show on managing heat emergencies, which are going to become more and more common as our climate continues to to change as a result of environmental changes. So there are emergency things you need to do as far as when we're having a heat emergency, such as if you don't have air conditioning, finding out where the cooling centers are in your community, as well as all of the things we've talked about, the water, the food, all the rest of it.
The other thing too, Dr. Maxey, you mentioned specifically for like people who might live alone or who don't have independent transportation, go real old school and know your neighbors, right? Like get on somebody's list such that, because sometimes we have warnings for some of these things and it's about preparation. I'm not saying that you would expect somebody to take care of all of these other things for you, but have somebody local who's on your list that will, check on you and see if you need a ride to evacuate. Like do some, like just some basic, know your neighbors and make sure that they know, hey, I'm over, and I might need a ride.
And not only know your neighbors, but you should know your family and people who have a vested interest in you getting out of Dodge. I think that's very important.
Well,
Let's
let
go.
me let
Go
me
ahead.
let me add, Dr. Maxey, in terms of preparing your vehicle. Um, Folks sometimes comment on the fact that in the winter time, I keep an extra coat, I keep some heavy boots, I keep some snow pants, I keep heavy socks in my car because I don't know when somebody else is going to mess something up on the highway, and it might be 20 degrees outside, and I've got to either sit in my car for a long time or I've got to walk somewhere. And even though there's no large emergency, things can be challenging very quickly. We had an episode in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago where something happened on the road, and folks were in their cars for a long time, and cars running out of gas after the 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours sitting out there.
17 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, people knocking on each other's car windows to try to get in out of the cold. So I just find that I would rather have folks laugh at me and ask me, why is all that stuff in your car? Yeah, you guys go ahead and laugh, but at least I don't worry if
So
I have to walk.
let me add to this discussion and questions. What's the difference in an emergency between a gasoline car and an electric car? What are some of the challenges that either one of those might pose?
Look, my little tiny electric car is just fine because people say, well, what if you run out of charge? I'm like, what if you run out of gas? Because if you're stuck on a highway somewhere, we're gonna all run out of something pretty soon. And to emphasize Dr. Heinz's point, if you have a neighbor that has one of those vehicles that can, um, go across down trees or whatever else is going on, make sure you're very friendly with that neighbor because there may
Yeah,
be,
what's up?
I like to call them extraction vehicles. You may want to have a neighbor with an extraction vehicle
No, I didn't.
out of wherever you are.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear. Wow.
And the other question I have, the size of your vehicle, you mentioned a small one. So we all think about having the availability of an SUV or something that can hold your supplies and family needs and not just a little runabout car.
Yes, we should all have a very capable vehicle, depending on what the situation may be, both,
Okay.
or access to one. It's
Yeah.
sort of like the old statement, you don't need a whole lot of money, but you need friends with money. You don't all have to have a big extraction vehicle, but a close friend with one is not a bad plan.
Okay.
And I think that's critical, right? Because everybody doesn't have the ideal vehicle, right? Like sometimes you have what you have, right? And being realistic and honest about what you can bring, what you can take, how literally how far you think you can get or go, is part of your plan.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide. And since I typed it, I'm gonna take it. I don't know what the heck a listeroo is, but the idea of this slide was to create a grab and go bag and grab and go list. So in addition to your emergency kit, prepare a quick checklist that looks at things you need to take in just a minute if the time allows. One, cell phone and chargers, wallets, cash and credit cards, laptop or portable hard drives, family heirlooms, put them up, jewelry or irreplaceable items, uh, and prescription glasses or hearing aids. Now, if you got a, a major 10-foot painting, I think you got to leave that. But you want to make sure that in addition to your other emergency lists, that you grab what you can, especially the cash and your wallets and cell phones. And they should always be kept in place. I've taken a habit that I keep a briefcase and I keep a cell phone in there, my wallet in there, and even when I'm going to bed, I put my wallet there just so I can grab everything in one place. So that's something to do. Anybody else want to comment on this particular go bag?
I would like to add that in a lot of emergencies, you might just have to go. But in the case of the fires here in Los Angeles, a lot of people had warnings before they had to evacuate. So somebody sent me a list today that included taking a video of your house and the contents, including the inside of the drawers and closets, if you have time to do that.
So that sounds like something you should do right now, like ahead of that, ahead of the
Yeah.
emergency. Because you got to prove that you had certain things that need to be insured if insurance is still available or you're trying to replace things. So I think that's a good idea anyway. And store those things in the cloud. Let's go to
So,
the next. Go ahead,
so let
Tom.
me let me add, Dr. Maxey, the importance of cash. Credit cards and other forms of electronic payment that we use now may not work all the time, and it doesn't need to be an emergency. I was at a restaurant and trying to pay for my meal, and the credit card wasn't working. And no, Dr. Hines, it's not because I hadn't paid my bill, but I went later on, I went online and the bank had a little notice there that they were having some trouble with their credit card things, which disappointed me, but I was able to pay for my meal and not have to wash dishes. But we depend so much on technology, and we really have to be aware that an emergency might be a real emergency and the technology might not be working at that particular time or in that particular location.
So I don't have any, but how would Bitcoin be thought of in that light? Is that all electronic?
It's all digital. It only exists in the cloud, right?
So you
But
can't buy a hamburger with it.
not at most places, right? But it's a really good point about, for your tech savvy people who are used to, well, if I don't have my phone, I got Google Pay on my watch or whatever, right? If those things don't work, the number of people who haven't really, especially if you're talking about folks who their whole life has been their whole life has been digital. They don't even have recollection of the pre-digital world. And then you also have to, the other question too that I struggle with is how much, right? How much money? How much, do I need to have? How much food? How much, like, what's 3 days worth of food? And then is 3 days really reasonable? What would 3 days, what is 3 days gonna do if everything's gone? I really struggle with how
whether
much.
you're a teenage boy or not.
Yeah, again, all of those things, right? Because it's not finite. And if your emergency go ends up you've packed up like the Beverly Hillbillies, then that's a problem too, right? Because you have too many things. So thinking through a lot of this can be very overwhelming, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So, and let me go back to something, Dr. Maxey. Earlier, you mentioned having maps because GPS may not work. I was looking at some of the neighborhoods in Southern California. Um, I spent a lot of time in the Palisades. I used to work there when I was in college, and I would not recognize those places. And some of the folks who had lost homes were saying they couldn't find their homes because the neighborhoods looked so different. Road signs may have been damaged or burned up. And when I was down in the New Orleans area after Hurricane Katrina, helping down there, street signs were gone, buildings were gone, everything was gone. So having a map that might allow you to know where to make a right and left turn could be very helpful, especially if you're trying to get out of a place. You can take your time getting back in, but trying to get out, it may be very critical to be able to know where you're going.
Yeah, I have a way that I get around Los Angeles. When I first got here, I pictured the major roads in Los Angeles as a tic-tac-toe sign with the parallel bars being the 10 freeway and the 105 freeway, and the uprights being the 405 and the 110. Now, it's not exactly geographically correct, but if you divide your city into quadrants, if some of those things happen that Dr. Walk said, where you lose your landmarks, at least you can navigate somewhat by having a picture in your mind of what's north, south, east, or west. And that's something you might develop a sense of where you are and what's going on. Let's go to the next slide. So, Dr. Neighbor Stevens?
So we've touched on some of these points regarding evacuation assistance for those who are elderly or have special health needs. They're again, find out what's available in your community if you're going to stay in your community that can accommodate those needs as well as pets, um, and have a plan in place before there's the need for the plan so that you can just activate your plan. But I also want to mention something about when you're evacuating. We talked a little bit ago about having gas and getting frequent fill ups. But the other thing is, don't assume that the hotels along the way are going to be available. They frequently, quickly fill up. And even I recall when we had to do my daughter had to do an evacuation from Tampa to Nashville because of a hurricane with her pets. And she had assumed that she would be able to find a hotel when she got to Atlanta, which is about 8 hours, 9 hours from Tampa. And Atlanta was booked up. And she had to keep going north for a while before. In the meantime, I was busy on the phone trying to find a place and booking a reservation. So it requires the logistics of all of this in the middle of all of your emotional distress can be very challenging. And so to have a plan in place that that has been developed when you're not an extremist is certainly to your advantage.
Thank you. Ms. Romero,
Yes.
take the next one.
So it's important to stay informed, monitoring weather updates and alerts via the TV, radio, like we talked about earlier, or mobile phone. Sign up for local emergencies, notifications, or apps like FEMA or Red Cross. So yes, definitely staying up to date with alerts, warnings, paying attention to warnings. Heeding warnings is very important, not just listening to warnings, but it's important to get out when they say to get out. It could save your life.
I'd like to add to that some of this, what we have been talking about for the most part have been emergencies triggered by events that we knew were coming. But in Nashville, we frequently have tornadoes that you don't know are coming. And to make matters worse, the tornadoes are in the middle of the night when you are asleep. And 3 years ago, we went through a middle of the night storm, and we did not hear the warning signal. But fortunately, again, talking about having family and friends that you're connected to, my daughter on the other side of town heard the warning and called us on the phone. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Called us and woke us up and said it was sighted very near our home and so we quickly went downstairs to the basement and did our emergency thing for tornadoes. My point being that sometimes these things you don't know are going to happen. Sometimes the alerts um, aren't heard for various reasons, and it's really important to have some contact people, whether it's family or friends in the community, to help you stay informed.
That neighbor, since you're on the road, wants to take the last slide.
Practice regular maintenance. Well, we talked a little bit about this before, and it goes to the point that these things, your kits, the components of your kits expire. Just like we strongly advise people to do an annual check of their smoke detectors and CO2 detectors, because the batteries may go out. So figure out a way, tie it to something, tie it to a holiday, tie it to a birthday, tie your check to something that you will remember and do your check. And we can't say it too much. We really need to be proactive and well prepared so that we can safely manage these emergency situations.
You mentioned children.
I mentioned children?
The third point. To involve the children.
Involve the children in preparation to reduce their anxiety during actual emergencies. My daughter actually she's 11 and has asked on multiple occasions now if we have a safe room or like a bunker. And I was like, no, because we don't have that kind of money. But I did tell her to this point, as I said earlier, I have a bunch of stuff, but I had not discussed the things that I have and the steps that I have taken with them. So they, without sharing it with them, then I had not reduced their anxiety. So allowing your kids to know or to be involved in your preparation is not only good, because what happens if something goes down and the adult is not home, but they can know all is not lost, right? I have these things, there's stuff here. There were steps that were taken. The other thing I would also say to be realistic about, a lot of preparation, just like in any other place in your life, sometimes has a fiscal note, right? And getting all of these things together, the walkie-talkies, think about the life straws, whether or not you're going to Costco to get those little, dried food packets or whatever it is that you're getting together, even maps, fiscal note. So take, as is reasonable for you, take your time accumulating, because you're not going to be able to just, well, who knows? I was not able to just buy everything in any one fell swoop. And some stuff, I don't have the generator that I would like. I have a small one. It might run the refrigerator. I can't afford the one that would help run my whole house and all the rest of that stuff. So you're going to have to make choices and maybe go in with some people, whatever you got to do. My sister and I have some things that, we'll plan to share if it goes down that way. But there is a real fiscal note beyond just the cash that you want to have on hand in
Let me
getting
add,
these things together.
let me add to what you're saying, Dr. Hines. We've talked about natural disasters. Just for a moment, I want to speak about civil unrest, where our community could be under stress. Anybody want to comment on that? Some of the readiness things that we need to have, especially discussing family routes of escape and things. Dr. Walks, maybe you're military, ex-military.
Uh, yes, Dr. Maxey, I did serve in the military, and I think that um, being prepared for things that you can reasonably manage, that you can reasonably imagine may happen, makes a lot of sense, depending on your your orientation to weapons. When you talk about civil unrest, having something that you feel will protect your family. And to Dr. Hines's note, yes, everything costs something. So if you're concerned about having the right kind of door that somebody can't easily kick in, if you're concerned about being able to board up some windows in case of either hurricane or some sort of unrest. This can really get to be a very involved thing. And just to say, I don't really want to make everyone overly anxious. And Dr. Lawson just raised his hand to come in and hopefully talk about some of the mental health considerations in all of this. Dr. Hines mentioned her 11-year-old daughter being concerned about what would happen and what if the adult may not be home. What if the adult is injured and a younger person has to be responsible for getting the family together? So I would love to have Dr. Lawson talk about this.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just want to note that I've been involved in several civil unrests, one in Washington, D.C. when they had a riot, another time, surprisingly, in New Hampshire, when somebody spread a rumor that black folks were running, chasing white girls. And the only thing that kept me from being jumped on is that they knew that I helped run the Taekwondo class. So it's important to recognize that, especially, I just want to note there's special needs in terms of our community. Our young folks still get these rules, but the bottom line is that surprisingly, in many isolated parts of our country, if you're not careful, you can be a victim of, I won't say lynch mobs, but of large numbers of angry folks who want to do yourself in. And so it's important to buy some folks that you can carry a gun. That unfortunately that does not work against a mob. But to learn de-escalation techniques by working with crowds, and also I think everyone should know at least minimum self-defense techniques in terms of these kinds of situations. Again, it's just a recognition that we talk about things like racism, institutional racism, blah, blah, blah. The reality is that it can also have personal consequences if you are not prepared, that it may not take very much for some folks around you to want to do yourself in. And the other point is also, but at the same time, let folks know most of the time, stuff does not happen. To reassure them stuff does not happen. You have support all around you. If you have friends, if you have a cell phone, if you have others, you can always call in to get the support you need. I see a lot of folks scared for their lives and what they've learned on TV, YouTube, and others. But 99.9% of that stuff simply is not dangerous to the individual. And it's important to recognize that sure, bad things can happen. We could be struck by a meteorite. The sun might go nova. But most of these things are not going to happen for most people.
Well, thank you so much. Before we close, we're almost at the top of our, Ms. Romero, I'm sort of catching you by surprise, but should our families and our children who are old enough know basic life support or basic first aid? Are there a few things that you'd like your family to know if somebody gets a cut or sustains an injury, or a dog bite, or somebody's heart stops? what can we do in the meantime? We all know we should call 911. But what are a couple of things you would suggest that we teach our families and everybody can contribute to this?
So I think it's important that everybody knows basic CPR. Even young children can be taught CPR, can be taught to save a grandparent or save a parent that's unconscious.
What's CPR? What is CPR?
CPR,
Yes.
chest compressions. So yeah, that's basic life support that can save a life until medics show up or an ambulance.
Okay. And Dr. Neighbor Stevens, how young should we train our kids for emergencies?
You know, children are very resilient and very intelligent. Now, there are programs available for very young kids, 5-year-olds, for basic CPR. They also have the Red Cross and other agencies. We haven't been hopefully not talking about a major flood, but there are classes to help young kids know what to do in the event of a flooding situation. And then we all can help our children understand if a live wire is down, go the opposite way from it. Do not attempt to touch a downed wire. So there's a combination of things that parents can teach and agencies can teach so that young children, the most common thing, I shouldn't forget to mention this, teaching them how to call 911 and reporting an emergency. There are many stories about how very young children, as young as 3, have called 911.
Did they learn that from Elmo?
Can I just add
From
briefly,
Can
can I just add briefly that don't take for granted that your kids, teenagers as well, actually know your phone number or actually know your address, right? I'm talking middle schoolers, elementary schoolers, high schoolers, because again, digital people, right? Everything's in the phone, right? Think about all the things all the people who you communicate with on a regular basis, who somebody said, what's their phone number? You'd be like, I don't know, let me look, right? So, that they know your license plate or any of those kinds of, don't take for granted that just because a kid is older that they know those things, because 1, it's not part of traditional school anymore, and 2, that's not how they've been navigating the world.
Thank you.
So Dr. Maxey, Dr. Kervin Dawes had raised her hand earlier, and then Dr. Lawson has his hand up.
Dr. Kervin Dawes in Jamaica.
I think she's still muted.
Simon, can you?
Maybe while we're trying to get Dr. Kervin Dawes unmuted, Dr. Lawson. Oh, there she is. Go ahead.
I was just listening to all of this. I mean, for us in Jamaica, I was thinking about the fires because in our summer and our dry season, we tend to have fires. They're more in bare areas, so they're controlled before they reach houses. But I was thinking as the seasons worsen, we have to think about it more. But we constantly prepare for hurricanes, and I think we just went through a category 4 in this hurricane season. One of the things that we have, but we have them all the time, is those rechargeable batteries. They actually come with a flashlight. They can charge your vehicle, charge your phone. We keep if most people cars in Jamaica have one in the back, and that's usually charged up for hurricanes. Beside all your phones being charged, that's charged. Everybody gets gas before a hurricane. They actually keep gas in bottles before a hurricane. Most people here year round, I don't know if that can be done there, because I notice Florida is getting more and more hurricanes, and that part is they keep extra boards just in case you have people want to break in your house because we have bars on our lower level. We live in Jamaica, so the most lower levels of houses have bars on it. But we keep extra boards if you do not have hurricane shutters. We also tell people, and people forget, is you need extra water. So fill your bathtubs, because most of your water after all of this, if you're at home, may not be clean. So you have to, pardon me?
Excellent points.
So you actually have extra water for everyone. And actually it's a fair amount of water because it's not just drinking. We also, if you have freezers, we warn our kids, if hurricane come, you do not open it if we use electricity. You have to realize in Jamaica, because when we lose with a flood or a hurricane, there were areas in Jamaica that did not get electricity for 4 months after the last hurricane. 4 months.
Well, thank you so much.
So backup water, backup electricity, have your medicines and the kids' toys all in one. We use a suitcase that we pack up before our events. Couple suitcases. We use not soft suitcases, but usually hard ones, so that you can get through whatever you have to get through.
Thank you, Dr. Dawes. Dr. Lawson?
Very quickly, just want to note some basic stuff. In such areas as DC, an inch of snow can lead to ice. They had 2 people already fall. One is in the East ICU. You can fall. People forget that. The other is that if there's electrical, as you mentioned, lying on the ground, electrical cable, don't, now even, we know to tell the kids, adults, don't pick it up. The nature of disaster is that animals can be frightened. They see a dog, a large animal, say, oh, they're scared. Let me go pet them. They might bite you when you're doing it. And then one other very basic thing that's actually happening all over the country and we seem to neglect. If there is a gun, tell a young person, do not pick it up. Don't take it home to play with. Don't do it. That is a major cause of death in many of our African American communities.
Thank you so much. One of the things that disturbed me, and Tom, if there's anybody who's wants to have their hand raised, we want to recognize them. But I was very disturbed to find out that it looks like some of these fires may be based on arson. And I really think that we need to be on the lookout for that, and those people should be punished as per the law, as well as people who are doing looting of the personal property of the unfortunate people who are victims to the fire. Are there any other statements or questions that need to be made that we want to recognize? Anybody?
Can we add one quick thing? Electric vehicles. Please, because of the lithium batteries, there's now a warning out. We got the warning in Jamaica as well, that if you're having heavy rain or flooding, the water cannot be anywhere near the batteries because you can have a spontaneous fire. Yes. Yes. So you have to be very careful when you are having heavy rain, water, flooding, hurricanes coming in.
You hear that, Dr. Walks?
Y'all just go ahead with the electric vehicle hate, because whoever this person was that got stranded in the Arizona desert, Dr. Lawson, they ran out of gas in the desert too. So,
I know, that's right. The difference is though that they couldn't get nobody would put a gas truck and go out there and rescue them. Whereas they
do have trucks that will come out and rescue your electric vehicle, or that will come and tow your electric vehicle to a place to charge it. So y'all go ahead with all that hate. Y'all go ahead. I'm gonna keep.
Does Efren Lau have a comment? And I also want Dr. Sainer to defend his state that Dr. Lawson said had civil unrest. Efren Lau?
Yeah, I'm here. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. No, we don't have civil unrest up here. Barbara always tells me I'm living in a bubble, and she's right. We have a town that's 94% Democrats, and plenty of room, fresh air, and welcoming for everyone. So it's a paradise up here, but It's very, very different than any urban area I've ever been to. And so it's refreshing to hear what everyone has to say, but up here it's very different. And it's part of the attraction as to why we ended up retiring here. So, and as far as
Cool.
like the kind of natural disasters and things that we're talking about and fires and all, we have neighbors that come to help neighbors. Very different. You know, it's a community. And if a fire was to break out, neighbors would go to neighbors' houses. Do you need a lift? Do you need help? Do you need whatever you need? Kind of thing. Food. We've been invited over to neighbors' houses during bad storms and things. So it's how it should be. And unfortunately, it's not how it is everywhere else. And that's why we ended up here, I guess. That was part of the pull here.
Thank you, Dr. Tanner. Evelyn Lau, are you there?
Hi, Dr. Massey. Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone. I just really am enjoying the show today and good reminders of what we need to do to be responsible for ourselves as well as our loved ones and neighbors. So thank you all for this topic.
Okay. Any other comments, Dr. Walks, in the chat or?
I just wanted to quickly mention, don't forget our drug addicts. Who? Drug addicts? What? Yes, drug addicts. One of the issues that came up at in Louisiana and also in DC when we had hurricanes and other natural disasters, the drug addicts couldn't get the opiate, couldn't get them. And the result, man, someone got life-threatening illnesses or severely ill. So it's important to recognize we need to have available that which can deal with those folks who are addicted and who may need addiction treatment.
That's a very good point. Another point I read about is if they're hospitalized people and you have to evacuate a hospital, they're suggesting that each person should be assigned a sitter so that you don't lose track of their evacuation and where they're going. There are a lot of things we could go into, but just we know that I used to be a Boy Scout, Dr. Wilkes, and our motto was be prepared. And that's what this is all about. Be prepared. I'm sure the list is long, what we can add, but be prepared. And even if it takes you 6 months to get prepared, buying 1 or 2 things at a time. Let's go with last comments, starting with Ms. Romero.
Again, it's important to be prepared, listen to warnings, heed warnings, get out when they tell you to get out, keep those emergency kits up to date so they are, in fact, useful to you when you need them.
Thank you very much. Dr. Hines.
www.ready.gov. I'll say it again, www.ready.gov. A lot of the things that we've talked, because again, we've given you a lot of information, but you don't have it on your hands, right? You don't have a list. So you can go get lists and details and examples of kits and all of those types of things at that site.
Thank you very much. That's Walks.
Two comments. First of all, I've had my little electric vehicle for 5 years now through many hard, heavy rains and everything else, and it's never caught on fire. And it worked. I've driven it through water splashing all from all directions, and it's just fine. So I just have to stand here for the folks with the electric vehicles. I've never driven it through a flood where it got submerged. So I respect Dr. Kervin Dawes's comment. But I think that when we move around, when we talk about vehicles, knowing what's in your vehicle can make a huge difference. Just one little example. I remember I got some food poisoning one time at an event, and I was trying to get home and having that gallon-size Ziploc bag in my car all the time allowed me to put what I needed to put in that gallon-size Ziploc bag. I keep one in the car all the time. I never know what may need to get put in that bag very, very quickly. So just common sense things that can help us make it from one day to the next without either making a mess or being in a mess. I think are just important. And Dr. Hines, is it www.ready.gov? See, we don't have to think about everything. Some smart people and smart computers have thought about things and put them on certain sites for us. So that's my comment.
Thank you very much. Dr. Barbara Davis Stevens.
Thank you so much. My comment is, I certainly hope not really relevant to our immediate audience, but since we are archiving these and other people may have access to it, my comment is, I know there are a lot of people say, "Well, I don't watch the news. I don't want to. I can just get what I just watch what I want to watch. I'm not going to name them, but they feel no need of keeping up with what's going on. It's important. It's really important to stay informed. So you can boycott the news 24/7, but at least 30 minutes out of the day, tune in and find out what's going on around you."
I think that's a very important comment. As my final comment, I'm concerned that many of the unfortunate people in the burn areas have lost everything, their homes and their loved ones and things in their homes. And the insurance companies have left the state of California, so they have no recourse. And maybe there's some federal or state resources that can help them. But the idea comes to mind talking about self-reliance, that I would hope that somebody on this Zoom call, and I know a few, we can have a roundtable one day and find out, should we have a way to have a substantial insurance presence that we control for our communities at some point. But everybody have a great day. Simon, I hope your football games come out, and thank you so much for helping us. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy yourself.
Bye.